Hello, Rams family. Welcome to Rams Latest, your daily source for everything in and out of the Rams house. I'm your host, Brady Petrik. Let's get into it. Starting off today with some wide receiver news from around the league, this time regarding Eagles receiver A.J. Brown. There's been reporting in recent weeks that a trade to send Brown to the Patriots is basically a done deal, and that the teams involved are just waiting until after the June 1st deadline for financial reasons. So the compensation package for A.J. Brown will reportedly include a first-round draft pick, but from 2028 rather than 2027. And this lines up with the general sentiment around the league that the 2027 draft class is going to be very strong, especially at quarterback. So because of this feeling, most teams are reluctant to part with any picks from the first round of next year's draft. However, there's increasing smoke from pundits that the Rams may be in a unique position to trade for A.J. Brown, and that stems from them taking Ty Simpson in the first round of this year's draft. Well, however you feel about that pick, the Rams are officially set at quarterback for the next 2 to 5 years, which means they have perhaps the least incentive of any team to hold on to that first round pick in next year's draft. So even though the A.J. Brown trade to the Patriots is all but done, that deal might have been made on the assumption that every team was going to want to hold on to their 2027 first rounders. And in the post-draft landscape, that assumption has changed pretty definitively for the Rams. So I think the Rams alone are in a pretty unique position to swipe A.J. Brown away from the Patriots. They definitely have the draft capital and the cap space to accommodate him, and their first-round offer might be more appealing than what the Patriots are willing to part with, especially since the Pats are going to have a tougher first-place schedule this season, which could result in a higher pick in next year's draft. Now, the biggest hiccup in this plan comes from A.J. Brown himself, who's indicated in the past that he's more interested in being the guy on his team than he is in winning another Super Bowl. He made that pretty clear after his victory with the Eagles. But this season could be a unique opportunity for him to step into that guy role for the Rams. Puka Nacua has been a consistent liability both because of injury and off-field behavior, so A.J. Brown could step into the wide receiver one role as basically a one-season rental while Puka tries to get himself right this season. If Brown's able to convince himself as much, then he might be willing to take the offer, and that would be an immediate answer for the Rams receiver room, and it would turn them into the most dominant group of pass catchers in the entire league. It's a long shot, and I wouldn't be predicting it for any other team, but I think the Rams are in such a unique position that I have to entertain the thought, and it is a pretty entertaining thought. Well, with most of the teams settling on their roster positions in the post-draft shuffle, we have a pretty clear sense of what all these teams are going to look like heading into the start of the season. And with that, I wanted to run down which teams have done the most to move their needle in quality, either for better or for worse. So let's take a look at which teams are going to be rising and falling around the league, especially in regards to teams that the Rams are going to be playing in the 2026 season. So just to recap the schedule for the Rams this year, we have the Seahawks, the Niners, the Cardinals, of course, division rivals playing them each twice. And then we have the Cowboys, the Giants, the Eagles, and the Commanders, all the NFC East teams. The Raiders, the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Chargers, all the AFC West teams, and then the Bills, the Packers, and the Buccaneers to round out the schedule. So out of this slate, I'm most interested in what's been happening around the NFC East, starting with the New York Giants. Their offense is going to start becoming more cohesive this season, I feel. Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo both showed flashes last year, and the Rams have showed during their playoff run that they have a bit of a weakness for shifty runners, so those two in particular scare me a bit. And Malik Neighbors should become an immediate factor when he's able to return to the field. He was out most of last season due to injury. And these three core contributors, that's Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, and Malik Neighbors, they barely got to play together last year, so the limits of the offense when all three are on the field really hasn't been seen or tested yet. And they also made some impressive additions at the draft as well. Their top pick in the draft this year was Arvell Reese, who could become a game wrecker. He's a plug-and-play weapon, and he could end up anywhere on the defensive scheme. And actually, for that reason, I'm kind of hoping that the Giants get slotted earlier into the schedule so that he hasn't really found his place on the team yet. That might be a nice little strategic upset if we're able to play them early. Even though the Giants did lose Dexter Lawrence before the draft in a trade with the Bengals, they still have a lot of uniquely gifted defensive pieces who can blow up big plays. I'm thinking of Abdul Carter and Brian Burns. And I'm expecting more out of both of these units overall, not just because of the personnel upgrades, but also because they got an upgrade in head coach with the hiring of former Ravens head coach John Harbaugh. Now, you can debate Harbaugh's success in big moments, especially recently, but he is inarguably an upgrade over the brain trust who's been running the Giants for the past half decade or so. So to put it in a way that the Giants fan can understand, better ingredients, better chef, better pizza. Next for the rising teams, I have the Dallas Cowboys, and they used their first-round draft picks to make an immediate impact. They added Caleb Downs and Malachi Lawrence, who's going to make their defense a much, much bigger problem this year. The Cowboys were 30th overall in defensive rankings last year and ranked dead last in passing defense. So the nice thing about rock bottom is there's really nowhere to go but up for them. And along with these draft picks, they also have ads like Quinion Williams and Rashawn Gary. So these ads should really easily elevate this defensive unit into something beyond what they've been even just in the last few years. And for the time being, the Cowboys' offense is still intact. Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are both returning and have consistent production together, even with the addition of George Pickens last season. And for the time being, the Cowboys do still have George Pickens on their roster. He just signed this franchise tender with the Cowboys recently. And while this is also the first logistical step in perhaps trading Pickens, he is still on the roster for now, and he hasn't generated as much trade buzz from teams as some of the other receivers who are still available have. Add to that some impressive play from Javonte Williams down the stretch. He's been giving them some of their best running back play since primary Zeke Elliott. And I think this offense is still in a position to put up a fight and be just as electric as last year. And the defense has gotten a little bit tougher. Again, nowhere to go but up. Definitely risers in my book. And finally, I hate to say it, but we also have the Philadelphia Eagles in the rising category this offseason. So I'll be honest and say that the Eagles took pretty much every guy that I thought the Rams should target in the draft. I mean, obviously they ended up with Mekhi Lemon in the first round, who was widely expected to be chosen by the Rams at 13. I think a lot of fans had already kind of gotten used to the idea of seeing him in the blue and gold. But he ended up on the Eagles, as did tight end Eli Stowers, who was a great positional ad, and offensive tackle Markel Bell, who has the potential to become a really one-of-a-kind player and unique disruptive weapon given his one-of-one physicality and his interesting basket of traits. And although I don't expect him to make much impact this season, Nigerian prospect Uar Bernard has a very unique skill set and could end up being a keystone for their team in the future. If you don't know, there is an international program where the NFL likes to bring in players who don't have a history playing football but have some unique athletic abilities. And Uar Bernard came in on this program but has not played a down of football in his life. So there's going to be quite a learning curve there. And when they figure out where they're going to put him on the field, that's when I'll start factoring him into how they're going to play. So the loss of A.J. Brown does seem like an eminent problem for the Eagles. I mean, he's all but confirmed to be headed for the Patriots, although, like I said, I'd like to see the Rams try to get in there with that 2027 pick. And while I don't think they found a one-to-one replacement in Mekhi Lemon, I do think they'll be able to go full money ball and make up Brown in the aggregate. So Lemon is a slot monster who can immediately draw coverage away from other receivers, and Devonta Smith does his best work when he's able to split coverage and maximize temporary mismatches. So having Lemon around should help him produce among some of his best levels. And they also made some additions this offseason. The Eagles brought in Jontavian Wicks over from the Packers, Hollywood Brown, and Elijah Moore. So the three of them have had some pretty good play in the past, and some guys going up in their career, some guys kind of coming down off a peak. So they should have some decent composition for that wide receiver 3 slot. And the previously mentioned tight end Stowers should help in the pass catching group as well. So it's not a very robust group, I would say, especially if they're able to settle on one prime wide receiver 3. But Jalen Hurts has shown in the past few years that he kind of prefers to operate with a restricted route tree anyways. So it's preferable to him to spam a few guys often and otherwise rely on the run game, which of course is still strong for the Eagles with Saquon Barkley. And the Eagles also made a trade during the draft, picking up linebacker Jonathan Bernard from the Vikings over draft weekend. And he's going to bolster their defense much more than any of their late ads would have. So I think that was a pretty wise choice by them. So even with A.J. Brown gone, I'm moving the Eagles up based on how they covered the gap at receiver and still found upgrades at other positions. Now for the teams that I think backslid a little bit this season, who I'm calling the fallers. And I'm going to be starting with the Buffalo Bills. Now, their receiver room last year left a lot to be desired, and they attempted to fix that problem by trading for DJ Moore this offseason. And while Moore is definitely a team-elevating player when he's playing at his best, I think that level of play has been pretty inconsistent throughout his career. He gets upset pretty quickly on a personal level when he doesn't get the ball as much as he wants, and in Buffalo, where Josh Allen is prone to mid-play shakeups and all-or-nothing heroics, I think that Moore might be complaining about targets early and often. That could obviously be remedied with a few more targets in later games, but I see that potentially being a problem right out the gate. Now, they also drafted a receiver in the 4th round, Skylar Bell, but Bell has a pretty similar skill set and physicality to Khalil Shakir, so he's acting more as a backup rather than addition to the receiving core. In fact, drafting backups was kind of a consistent theme for the Bills in 2026. Their first pick in this year's draft was a pretty good edge rusher named TJ Parker, but they used their other picks to double up at positions where they already have depth, like cornerback and offensive tackle. So I don't see a team that has addressed their biggest needs from last season. I mean, Josh Allen is still pretty much the entire passing game, and their defensive unit is still competent but middling, and it lacks a lot of depth, especially for a deep playoff run. So for a team that seems to always be on the precipice of greatness, I think their individual units just don't scare me as much as I would expect them to, especially compared to some of the other teams in the last category. Next in our group of followers, we have the outliers from the NFC East, the Washington Commanders. Now, yes, I think that Sonny Styles was a very good pick, especially for them, and he could be an immediate impact player on their pretty lacking defense. But besides that, I'm just seeing the same roster, but 1 year older and 1 year more injured. Jaden Daniels was banged up one way or another for most of last season, which will only make it harder for him to return to that level of play from his unbelievable rookie year. Still very impressive, but we just haven't seen him get back there, understandably so, with the injuries. And their lead receiver, Terry McLaurin, turns 31 in September, and their receiving options after McLaurin get pretty dire. So rather than grabbing someone consistent from around the league in the offseason, they're banking on rookie Antonio Williams to solve their receiver problems. But the Commanders are very much a Kleenex team in terms of their skill players. They like to use them up and throw them away and move on to somebody else. So I'm hesitant to believe that Antonio Williams is going to immediately emerge as a star on this offense rather than being kind of grist for the mill like all the other players. I would much rather see, or I much expect him to get closer to a 700-yard season, say, than a 1,000-yard season this year. Add to that the fact the Commanders have no giddy up at running back to help with the passing game. I mean, Austin Eckler is a free agent coming off an Achilles tear. He could resign with them, but it's looking unlikely. And they did sign Rashad White from the Buccaneers, which seems more like a depth add than a talent upgrade given who they had available at position. And Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was the talk of the town in the preseason. Everybody loved Bill, but his production left a lot to be desired, and he still hasn't lived up to that praise he got early last year. So this offense scares me even less than it did last year, and last year it didn't scare me at all. And along with one of the oldest defensive units in the NFL, I don't see any ways that the Commanders are going to challenge the Rams in their matchup. Finally, we have those perennial Super Bowl favorites, the Kansas City Chiefs, who look to me to be weaker this year than any year in recent memory. I mean, first of all, their cornerback room has suffered greatly, mainly because the Rams took their two best guys. But they traded up to get Mansour Delane in the first round of the draft, the top prospect at cornerback, and they're planning to pair him with second-year Noel Williams. Now, Mansour's a great player, but the NFL is a different game, and he might get shown up by some seasoned pros like Puka and Devontae, especially early in the season. And that's another reason why I'm hoping to see the Chiefs early in the season as well. Moving on through their offense, trying to remember who even plays receiver for the Chiefs. There's Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Tyquan Thornton rounds out that top three. And from there, you can really see that these guys are missing Tyreek Hill because these are all speed guys. Rashee Rice is a little more toolsy, but not as much as you would want to cover the spread for the guys who are other speed-focused receivers. Now, they also drafted Cyrus Allen in the draft, who Mahomes could potentially feed in the slot, but that's a lot to ask of a rookie, especially a sixth-round talent in a very heavy wide receiver class. I just don't know if he's going to be able to step in and make the kind of immediate impact they would need to there. Oh, and they still don't have a replacement for Travis Kelce yet. He's been consistently trending downward for the past few seasons, so no real news there. Just surprising they haven't covered that up yet. Now, the Chiefs did draft some notable adds for their defense, mostly Peter Woods and R. Mason Thomas for their front seven, but I think that the Rams line can handle these prospects specifically, especially Thomas, who's a tad undersized at his position. And the Chiefs did sign Kenneth Walker to add to their run game, but that doesn't really scare me at all. I mean, I credit most of Walker's production to the Seahawks offensive scheme and the personnel around him, and his injury history means it's kind of a toss-up whether he'll be playing in this game when they face the Rams anyway. So overall, I think the Chiefs offense is going to be similarly underwhelming this year, and I think none of the additions on the defensive front scare me so much as the potential mismatch as corner excites me. So, with some fresh analysis on the current state of our rivals, I wanted to make my first win-loss predictions for the 2026 season. So, I'll be taking a look at the schedule. Even though we don't have actual dates for now, I'll definitely go back when we have those. But for now, I just wanted to project these games based on the current strength of everyone's post-draft roster. So, without further ado, I'm going to do a little one of my favorite tricks and grab some index cards to make it that much more real. And I want to break down the full Rams roster and say who I think is going to come out of each of these matchups. And I'll try to be as fair as I can. Of course, this is a Rams program. And we're going to be starting with the San Francisco 49ers, and that first game is in Melbourne, Australia, that kickoff game. Now, for the Niners in the start of the season, they're usually healthier, and that usually makes me a little more afraid of what they're able to do. But I also remember the last game that the Niners played against the Seahawks, where they got absolutely smoked. And I think that the Rams looked a lot better the last time they took the football field. And they also didn't lose very many pieces, still coming back very much the same unit. If I were projecting this to be just the same two teams from the end of last season playing again, I would definitely take the Rams. So I'm going to take the Rams again. Put that one in the win column. Next, we have the Broncos, who were in the AFC Championship game, but didn't really belong there, if you ask me. And they made an upgrade at receiver with Jalen Waddle, but I still think that their offense is a little bit anemic and really depends on one like massive explosive play per quarter. I'm more confident in the Rams secondary than I was before, and the Broncos didn't scare me much to begin with. So I'm also going to put the Broncos in the win column for the Rams. The Chiefs, as we just mentioned, I think are on a bit of a downslide. I certainly like the matchups that we have with their corners and against ours. I think that the guys that we just got from them should be able to cover their offense pretty tightly, and they should know that game pretty well. So I think for a myriad of mismatches, I'm going to put the Chiefs in the win column as well. Oh boy, the Seahawks. Always the closest games that the Rams play every year. If I'm going for the first Seahawks game of the season, I'm going to be honest. I'm saying it's going to be a pretty tight matchup. And I know there have been some shifts on the offense with losing Kenneth Walker, but it's always better to be safe and to be pleasantly surprised. I think that the Rams and the Seahawks are probably going to split this year, and I think that they split last year. They typically tend to split even in non-competitive years. So I'm going to notch up this first one as a loss for the Rams, but I fully expect to be able to rectify that later in the season. Next, we have the Cowboys, who I put in the rising column, and they do scare me a little bit. Their offense is always able to pop off. I mean, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are a pretty scary one, too, and Dak Prescott has been playing really efficient and consistent ball. If he hasn't been, running around with his legs so much, his accuracy has really been improving. And that defense, I don't know if they scare me quite enough to push me off from this. I'm hesitant on this one. I'm really going back and forth. And you know what? Just to be safe, just to try to hedge my bets, especially around the NFC East, I will chalk up this one to a surprise Cowboys victory based off the strength of some exciting receiver play and just enough improvement on that defensive line. So Cowboys, you're walking out of this one, but the Rams are going to be pretty mad about it. Next, we have the Bills, another one of my fallers. And like I said, I always feel like this team should be a little bit better than they actually are. And their offense and their defense are, scary on paper and definitely in the pre-show with all the graphics. But when they're actually on the field, they don't scare me as much. And I think that this pretty aggressive Rams front four is going to be able to do some damage. And Josh Allen is always squirrely around the pocket, but I think just increased pressure is really the answer here. And since I have faith in that Rams defense, I'm going to put this Bills in the wins column. Next, we have the Cardinals. Oh boy, the less said about the Cardinals, the better. Jeremiah Love is a cool player and a great prospect, but he doesn't scare me much. I think this is an easy win at home or away for the Rams. Could be a good chance to get Ty Simpson some reps, but maybe don't let the Cardinals fans hear me say that. All right, next we have the Giants, another group of risers. Like I said, I think that they have a pretty young and exciting offense if they're able to get all those guys on the field together. They're a little more injury prone than a group of three that you'd like to see, but I still think if the three of them can be out there, that could cause some massive damage. They have the ability to run, be shifty on the line, which is always tricky for the Rams. And really, Malik Neighbors is a special talent. He could get some big special plays over the top of even some talented corners. Now, that being said, I don't think that the Giants' defense is going to be enough to stifle the Rams. I'm very confident in the level of offensive line play that they were getting throughout the season, and I think that the pieces that the Giants have, while physically talented, still have some work to do to get fully acclimated to one each other and gel as a team, especially under a new coach like John Harbaugh. So I'm going to say this will be a close game and an exciting one, but I'm going to give this one to the Rams. The Raiders. Now, this could be potentially interesting depending on how the quarterback room looks for the Rams at this point in the season. It could be a number one versus number two matchup, and I'm sure the NFL would love to get some ratings out of that. But for now, let's assume that we're walking in with Matt Stafford, and at that point, I don't think it's much of a contest. I mean, Fernando Mendoza looks to be a great prospect, but they didn't really surround him with much receiver help. I would look at the Raiders to be a big target for a juicy wide receiver one contract this offseason. So until then, I don't think that they have necessarily the supporting cast that they need to really get the job done. Austin Genty's another great player, but he couldn't really get past his O-line, and I anticipate that being especially hard against the Rams. So as much as I'm hopeful for the Raiders' future, maybe not this season, I'm going to give this one to the Rams as well. All right, we have the Cardinals again. Again, whether it's at home or away, the Cardinals don't scare me. I know they play some teams close, especially teams that have mascots that are blue cats. Look up the stats on that. But the Rams are not blue cats, and so I am not scared. I'm going to go 2-0 against the Cardinals. So sorry. All right, now we have the Buccaneers, which should be an interesting matchup, especially with the ad of Reuben Baines coming for the Buccaneers in the draft this year. Definitely not expected to go that far, and he looks to be an immediate impact player for this Buccaneers defense. So I am a little more scared of them. And also, they've been able to manufacture some pretty impressive offense at moments over the past couple of years. Now, that being said, they did lose Mike Evans this offseason, so I think that that's going to be pretty deeply felt. Even though he was banged up a lot of last season, he was really reliable. And Chris Godwin has had some tricky injury history as well, and I think that relying on him to get the kind of volume that has previously been given to Mike Evans season in and season out might not be the best for Chris Godwin's longevity. I think he's a great player, but I think he kind of needs to be balanced with somebody else, and I'm not sure who that somebody else is now. I think that this might be a little bit more of a low-scoring game. Like I said, I think the Buccaneers might be able to collapse the pocket a little bit more than some of these other teams and get after Matthew Stafford. But I think that given just the offensive quality that we're used to and the ability of the Rams to really scheme something up, especially in the last 2 minutes, I think that they'll be able to overcome a low-scoring game, and I'm going to give this one to the Rams as well. Not a homer, I promise. Next, we have the Chargers, who have been getting pretty exciting this offseason. I like that they made an upgrade on their offense by bringing in Mike McDaniel from the Miami Dolphins. And they also grabbed Brennan Thompson, I believe, the wide receiver in the draft. Pretty excited McDaniel made that pick and ended up ripping his shirt off, something I kind of thought would happen. And lo and behold. That being said, I think there are still a lot of questions on this Chargers offense. Quentin Johnston just got added on his fifth-year contract, and I think he's still a pretty big question mark. Obviously, not worth moving. He's still a big body target who can get about 700 yards a season, but not the kind of breakout person they were really hoping for. So I don't know. The Chargers are always around the middle of the field. They've been kind of shoring up their defense a little bit, and they can pop off a little bit. But I haven't seen any big ads this offseason that really make me confident in their level of play. I think that we could beat them last year, and I think we could beat them again this year. So I'm going to put that as a home showdown win for the Rams. Nothing personal against the Chargers. We love our neighbors. Going to the 49ers again, this time in San Francisco. Now, The later it gets in the season for the Niners, the more likely they are to be injured, whether that's because of electrical substations or their head coach is practicing. We'll never know. But the Niners always play the Rams hard, and I think that it's safe to anticipate a split here. Again, based on the level of play we were getting at the end of last season from both teams, I don't see an upset coming in the first game. But especially if the Niners are able to stay healthy and maybe the Rams get a little less lucky on the injury front, I could see this being a bit of a revenge game. I could see the Niners being pretty upset about the way the season is going so far and really hoping to take it out on the Rams. So just to hedge our bets, I'm going to say that the Niners and the Rams split 1-1 and give this one to the Niners, as much as it hurts. All right, next we have the Commanders, who again are the team I'm least scared of in the NFC East. I think that their aging defense and their not quite cohesive offense doesn't really give us much issue on either side of the ball. I think this will be kind of a sleepy game. I expect the Rams to come away with this pretty handily. I'm going to give this win to the Rams. Next, we have the Packers. Very interesting. So this was a very competitive division last year, and everyone in the NFC North is looking to differentiate themselves and really come out and claw out in the division and kind of get their wins outside of the division when they can. So I expect the Packers to play this one pretty explosively and really try to come away with wins in this game. I would anticipate some trick plays. I think they really need this to be a win on their schedule. And just because of that, and because I see them trying some really wacky stuff, and the Rams maybe thinking, you know what, well, let's just chalk it up as an L this week and get some rest, I am going to give this one to the Packers. I trust them, I think, more than any of the other teams in the NFC North, and I would not like to see what they're able to come up with on their best day, even with a little bit of shuffling in the receiver room. I still think Jordan Love is very talented, and I think that they're going to be just mad enough and just crazy enough to pull out this win. So I'll give this one to the Packers. That's a Rams loss. All right, we have Seahawks round two. Now, as I said, I think the Rams and Seahawks are going to split 1-1. They usually do. So I'm putting this one in the Rams column. I think that they're pretty good about trading blows, and whatever game they play next is pretty much a rewrite of the game they did the game before. So whatever the first game looks like, this will be the opposite, and I'm expecting the Rams to pull out ahead of that. And lastly, we have the Eagles, a personal favorite rival of mine. That snow game in the playoffs a couple years back was one of my favorite current modern Rams moments. I just love the way that they looked in the snow. So this is always a tight game. Let us not forget the field goal kerfuffle that resulted in a last second turnaround and maybe the most upsetting play in Vegas last year, where the Eagles were able to turn it around and win on a botched field goal on the final play. So there's always something crafty happening with the Eagles. And like I said, I think they made a lot of improvements. Even though they're going to be losing A.J. Brown, I think that they added some holistic pieces that could really help them around the field. But that being said, I think the Rams are a better team now than they were the last time they faced the Eagles. Actually, both times with that kick incident and in the playoffs as well. I think the Rams have gotten stronger, more cohesive as a team. I think that the health is a little more consistent between Puka and Stafford, especially. They're going to be on the field more often. And even though I think that the Eagles have become a better team, I don't think that that gap is enough to cover how much better the Rams are these days. The Rams are widely seen as the best team in the league for a reason. And even if they only come second to the Super Bowl champion Seahawks, I think that that's pretty good company to be in. So as good as the Eagles are, I think blow for blow, I'm going to give this one to the Rams. So let's take a look at how many of these wins we got for the Rams. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That is a 13-win season for the Rams based on my predictions, which should be more than enough to clinch this playoff spot even in the hardest division in the league. Hopefully we can rest up and get that number one seed this year. So obviously any number of changes could shake up these numbers, but for now, coming right off the draft, I'm pretty hopeful for the Rams season, and hope is what the offseason is all about. Well, that's all we've got today for Rams Latest. I'm Brady Petrik, and until next time, go Sheep.